That bag of flour in your cupboard, bought because the packaging looks rustic and wholesome, almost certainly is real flour. There's no credible evidence any major UK brand is secretly not flour. That's not the story here. The real story is which bags are genuinely wholemeal, containing the entire grain, and which are a blended brown flour riding on the same wholesome imagery without the same nutrition. Today I'm checking 9 bags leaning on that imagery without being fully wholemeal, then showing 3 that are the real thing. The most traditional sounding, longest running flour name in Britain is one that isn't. Quick standard before we start, because I want to be precise about what this actually is and isn't. Every single bag on this list is genuinely flour, milled from genuine wheat, sold completely legally. This was never a fake flour story, whatever the title might have implied walking in. It's a whole grain, or not story, instead, and that's a real distinction worth actually knowing. Wholemeal is a real, legally meaningful word in this country. It has to contain the entire wheat grain, bran, germ, and endosperm, with nothing removed during milling. Brown flour is a different, looser category that can legally contain only part of the bran and germ blended back into otherwise white flour, while still looking and sounding remarkably similar on the shelf. Brown paper packaging and the word traditional are doing a lot of convincing that the actual ingredients list sitting on the back doesn't always back up. There's one word that actually means something on a flour bag, and it's not Stoneground. And it's not traditional either, no matter how confident the packaging sounds about either of them. Number 9. Sainsbury's own label brown flour. Brown paper-style packaging and earthy colour scheme, bought assuming brown automatically means wholemeal without ever checking further. Brown and wholemeal are not interchangeable terms, no matter how similar they look sitting next to each other on the shelf. Worth checking the current ingredients statement on this exact bag before assuming. The colour and the packaging design are doing the convincing that the word wholemeal would actually back up if it were genuinely there in the ingredients. Brown is a colour, wholemeal is a promise. They're not the same word, whatever the packaging wants you to assume. That's the baseline mix-up running through this whole list right from the very first entry. The next one dresses the exact same gap in a more traditional sounding name instead. Number 8. Wright's traditional Stoneground brown flour. A name that sounds like it belongs to a village mill somewhere in the countryside. Rustic typography, a sense of old-fashioned baking behind every word printed on the bag. A traditional sounding name describes the brand's story, not necessarily the grain content actually sitting inside the paper. Worth checking whether this specific line is labelled wholemeal or a blended brown flour, before assuming either way based on the name alone. Heritage branding and whole grain content are 2 completely separate promises sitting on the exact same shelf, one supported by evidence, one just by a feeling. The name remembers the mill. The ingredients list remembers the shortcut instead. That's a heritage name doing some of the convincing work for you quietly without ever saying so directly. The next one is priced like a specialist artisan bag entirely at a noticeably steeper price. Number 7. Matthews Cotswold flour Stoneground. Stoneground artisan packaging, a noticeably higher price than the basic own label bags sitting one shelf down at a fraction of the cost. Stoneground describes the milling method used, not automatically the wholemeal content of what came out of it. A flour can genuinely be stoneground using traditional millstones and still not be labelled or formulated as full wholemeal. Worth confirming this specific product's actual status before buying based on the artisan feel alone. You may be paying a genuine premium for a milling technique rather than for more of the actual grain ending up in the bag. Stoneground tells you how it was milled between 2 stones. It doesn't tell you how much of the grain went in beforehand. That's a premium price technicality worth genuinely knowing about before you spend the extra money. The next one is a supermarket's own healthier sounding range doing something remarkably similar. Number 6. Asda's high fibre own label flour range. High in fibre, healthier choice tags printed right on the shelf edge, bought specifically for the nutritional upgrade over the plain bag sitting next to it. Added fibre framing doesn't confirm full wholemeal status on its own, no matter how healthy the shelf tag makes it sound. Worth checking whether this specific high fibre line is genuinely wholemeal or a part blended brown flour with fibre added back in afterward to boost the numbers on the pack. A health-focused shelf tag is a marketing choice made by the retailer, not a guarantee about grain content made by the miller. Higher fibre is a real checkable claim. It's not automatically the whole grain claim you assumed came bundled in alongside it. That's a health halo mix-up worth genuinely knowing about before your next shop. The next one is a name most households already have sitting in the cupboard right now, this very minute. Number 5. Whitworths plain and brown flour. The default bag bought for years without ever once comparing it to anything else sitting on the baking aisle shelf. Default familiarity doesn't confirm wholemeal content either, no matter how long you've trusted the name printed on the front of the bag. Worth checking the specific line's current wholemeal status before assuming this bag matches the rustic branding wrapped around it. Years of buying the exact same bag doesn't mean you've ever actually stopped to check what brown meant on the ingredient statement. You've bought this bag for years without ever checking what brown actually meant on it. That's a familiar default most shoppers never once question over years of buying it. The next one is priced and packaged like the organic, wholesome choice instead, at a noticeably higher cost. Number 4. Dove's Farm Organic Plain White Flour. Organic printed proudly on the front, a premium price attached to it. The easy assumption that organic automatically means whole grain too, since the two often get mentioned in the same breath. Organic describes the farming method used to grow the wheat, not the grain content sitting inside the finished bag. Worth checking whether this specific organic line is full wholemeal or a part blended brown flour before assuming either way just from the organic badge. Organic certification and wholemeal content are two entirely separate questions, sitting on the exact same bag, answered by two completely different parts of the label. Organic tells you how the wheat was grown in the field. It doesn't tell you how much of it actually made it into the bag. That's an organic branded mix-up, worth genuinely knowing about before you pay the premium price for it. The next one carries one of the oldest milling names in the entire country, going back generations. Number 3. Homepride Plain Flour. A genuinely old milling company name. Decades of shelf presence stretching back generations. A logo that feels like it belongs on the side of a windmill somewhere out in the countryside. Age and heritage alone don't confirm today's specific bag is wholemeal, no matter how long the company has actually been trading under that name. Worth checking the current specific line's wholemeal status before assuming the history alone guarantees anything meaningful about the grain inside. A genuinely historic name can absolutely sell a genuinely modern, blended flour under the exact same rustic branding it's always used since the beginning. The company is old. That doesn't make every single bag they sell whole grain by default. That's a historic name with a distinctly modern shortcut sitting quietly behind it. The next one is the brand most shoppers assume invented wholemeal baking in this country entirely, from the very beginning. Number 2. Allinson's Strong White Bread Flour. A brand closely associated in most shoppers' minds with whole food, traditional, health-conscious baking, going back generations of blue packaging on British shelves. Brand association isn't the same thing as actually checking the specific bag you're holding in your hand at the till. Worth checking the current specific line's wholemeal status before assuming the brand's overall reputation automatically applies to this exact bag of strong white flour. Even a brand whose entire identity leans whole food can sell non-wholemeal lines right alongside its genuine wholemeal ones on the very same shelf. The brand's reputation is wholemeal. Not every single bag with its name printed on it actually is. That's the second biggest mix-up on this entire list, right near the very top. The final one is the most traditional sounding flour name in the entire country by a wide margin. Number 1. 1. McDougalls Plain Flour. The name most shoppers would guess first if asked to name a British flour brand. Decades upon decades of shelf presence, packaging built entirely around heritage and tradition going back to 1864. The most traditional sounding name in the entire category, and the exact same wholemeal versus blend question as everyone else already covered on this list. Worth checking the current specific standard line's wholemeal status before assuming the name alone settles the question for you. The brand most associated with traditional British baking doesn't automatically clear the one bar that word implies it should. The most traditional name in British flour and the exact same question mark as the cheapest bag on this entire list. If the most iconic name in the category has this question mark hanging over it, here's what the 3 bags that actually answer it properly look like instead. Okay, 9 bags down, and I want to be genuinely clear about something before we move on. Every single one of them is completely, legitimately flour. What they share is a rustic word doing the selling, not a rustic promise actually being kept behind it. Here are 3 bags that kept that promise properly. Wholemeal 1, Dove's Farm Organic Wholemeal Flour. Same brand as the plain white entry covered earlier on this list, a completely different promise behind this particular bag. Labelled and formulated as 100% wholemeal, containing the entire wheat grain from bran to germ to endosperm. Organic certified throughout the whole process. This is what the word wholemeal is actually supposed to mean when it's printed on a bag. Wholemeal 2, Allinson's Wholemeal Flour. Same brand as the strong white entry further up this list. The version where the reputation and the actual bag finally agree with each other completely. A long-established UK milling name selling a genuinely clearly labelled 100% wholemeal line alongside its other products. Same kind of heritage name as the ones further up this list. This time the label actually matches the bag. Number 3, Marriage's Wholemeal Flour. A specialist UK milling brand selling clearly labelled, genuinely 100% wholemeal flour, rather than a part-blended version dressed up to look similar to it. This is the version where the premium price and the actual whole grain finally arrive together in the same bag for once. This was never really about 9 bad bags of flour sitting quietly in a cupboard somewhere, and it was never really a fake flour story, whatever the title suggested walking into this video. It's about the gap between a real, legally regulated word, wholemeal, and a similar sounding, far less regulated one, brown, traditional, or Stoneground, sitting right next to it on the same shelf. The same exact gap shows up across other grain products too, bread, pasta, rice, and breakfast cereal, wherever a cozy, wholesome sounding word sits next to a stricter, more meaningful one that most shoppers never learnt to look for. Once you learn to check for the specific regulated word instead of the colour of the packaging or the rustic font on the front, the same gap starts showing up throughout the entire baking aisle. Bag after bag, brand after brand, one shelf at a time.